Hey friends, welcome back. This is the Tommy Obenchain podcast, and I'm Tommy Obenchain, and I'm thrilled to be with you, coming to you today from the Delta Sky Club. Thank you, Delta, in Dallas, where, well, it's summertime. There's a lot of travel happening, both around me and I'm in it too, in the wild, like the last episode, which is really in part where I wanted to kind of keep this trend up. I don't know how often we'll get to do podcast episodes in the wild, but today it's really fun to be out here and it's really fun to be with you here and on the podcast. So, what are we talking about today? Well, it's a good question. Really, I had so much fun talking about Braniff on the last one, and I realized I was thinking about it like I made a couple of mistakes. Notably, I kind of just riffed and I went straight into let's talk about what Braniff could have been without really talking about to a better degree what Braniff was. Like, what's the story of Braniff? And so I want to lead with that today and really make that kind of the heart of the episode in so many words, because, well, the story of Braniff's really interesting, and it's one that you kind of can't understand what could have been if you don't understand what was, sort of thing, and maybe to a degree what happened. So we should talk about that. Anyways, so if you're wanting a little bit of airline history and maybe just a bit of kind of nerd out airline talk, this is an episode for you. If you worked for Braniff, I'd love to hear your stories. So shoot me an email. Seriously, I think that'd be so cool. I've met a few people who have worked for Braniff, but like don't know many. So if you're out there and you're listening, please contact me. And then number 3, if you're like, hey, not my cup of tea, good. Just pass go, collect $200, not literally. And we'll see you in the next episode. It's going to be great. But Braniff, that's who we're talking about today. What's their story? Plus anything else that just comes to mind as I'm recording this episode here in the Sky Club. I'll be sure to highlight that as well. It's a pretty great day in travel. I am just a quick update working on how we redo the deals section of the blog and newsletter. Insofar as right now, it's kind of become like a credit card bonus, just revolving door in the last week. And I'd like to have a better pipeline for deals. I don't have that figured out yet, but I am working on it. So stand by with me there because I do really want to have like great travel deals that I'm looking at, considering kind of keeping eyes on so that you can take action on them because that'd be helpful. It's interesting too. Obviously, you've had like these AI agents that have rolled out in the last, couple of days, like very new-ish development in AI world, which they're in like, what does that do? It allows an AI agent to go on and functionally like, do things for you on the internet. Much better technical explanation, much wider application than that. But that is an application we're seeing, which is cool because all of a sudden it's like, hey, AI agent, go and find me this trip to this place at this price, and it can achieve that without you having to do all this prompting to kind of get mixed results that then you've got to filter through, right? There's a long road ahead. I'm going to just gently submit with the AI and the world of AI and its real like human level applications versus like, oh wow, it made this kind of creepy image. Anyways, so what that implicates for travel, I'm watching closely, and it's not kind of a consummate solution yet, but I am really excited by the premise of AI agents and kind of what that represents for travel world at large and what it represents for you and for me in our travels. So no material update there, so I would say that got an eye on it, and we'll keep you informed here on the podcast and in the newsletter, and it ties into that deals section, really having like good deal flow, if I can say that, for your travels. So working on that, excited about it, because I'm excited about, well, your travels and my travels, because that's what we're talking about here. Travel, adventures, and the use of points to accelerate both in a graceful, good sense, because travel is a graceful and good thing. Thank you for letting me pontificate briefly there. Let's talk about Braniff. Kind of quickly, maybe it'll go long, maybe it'll be really fast. Okay, here's the backstory on Braniff. Classic airline, like many of the aviation brands that we both see and know today and are long lost and forgotten, kind of a part of the history books today. I referenced them in the last episode, but I think about Pan Am, Eastern, TWA. I totally failed to mention TWA as I sat at JFK Airport, and TWA, like in their, like Belle Epoque years were like, which I guess that was French for Belle Epoque. Haha. But seriously, TWA was this just, again, kind of juggernaut, if I can use that word, this massive carrier, this world-renowned brand that carried a lot of weight in the world of commercial aviation and just as a travel brand at large. And then they collapsed underfoot, largely due to mismanagement in the 90s. American bought them kind of a steal in 2001. And then you had just the successive events of the 2000s era that completely, left TWA in the dust insofar as a brand is concerned, and really even like the assets of the airline that American stripped pretty bare, put very plainly. So I say that to say that all the airlines we see today really were gently put, not kind of the glory days airlines that we would look back and say, like, wow, like, those were really the airlines that shaped the industry first. Those have largely were bought and kind of consumed by the brands that we see today. And yeah, I get kind of a bold statement, but I think it's not unreasonable, right? Like Braniff owned Dallas Fort Worth. An American comes in, kind of base himself in Fort Worth, and they just slowly like leech on and then push out Braniff out of the way. And that's great credit to American's management team for taking advantage of that. But American was this regional domestic airline. Before that, Braniff was the broader, bigger international airline that had a domestic network, but also then had the route authority for Central and South American networks that, shaped so much of those early decades of the industry that then, was parted out or just taken over. So kind of, assumed by carriers who got to run the show after their demise. And it's just an interesting kind of arc to look at. Again, you look at Braniff, or you look at TWA, or you look at Pan Am or Eastern, and those carriers all really were the first kind of, like network international airlines. And then the likes of Delta and United, American, Continental to a degree, and then Delta to Northwest, all of those carriers kind of, consumed what were the carcasses of these old glory days airlines. That's oversimplified, to be sure. We can kind of nitpick history. Why would you, though? It's more fun just to let me tell the story and listen, right? Anyways, the point is that Braniff was this airline that had a massive regional pull and a network that really did stretch domestically in the U.S. with like legitimacy, just to put it plainly. They're this very legitimate U.S. domestic player, and then they have a very legitimate, largely Central American international network with some South American stretch to it. Deregulation happens. They have no idea kind of what is coming for them insofar as the democratization of air travel. And now we're not competing on product, we're competing on price. And route authority can just be obtained kind of, wantonly almost relative to how it was before. And so we just need to fly everywhere. It became kind of this concept of land grab without really the question of how are we actually retailing fares so that we're going to see people show up and fly on our airplanes, and we're going to make money off of the flying on those airplanes. What you didn't have was the backstop of the government to be able to really and fundamentally subsidize the carriers in the midst of these transitions. And I don't mean subsidies in the sense of route subsidies or fare subsidies. I mean like, the government is just a total backstop. Like we can lose money and it doesn't matter. That no U.S. carrier was in that position. And so Braniff goes from this kind of, into the plane. We're flying Concorde in partnership with Air France and British Airways. We've got orange 747s. We're flying to Hawaii. We own the route authority to London from Dallas. We've got this really tremendous brand presence that is just fierce in both its in its customer base and in its tenure as a brand, right? And in all of this, they're eaten alive by low-cost carriers and then by a network that got very ambitious very fast without support. So like they're flying, LA. My understanding was they flew, with the references in the last episode, they flew LA to Guam to Hong Kong to Singapore. They had that in their schedule for at least one summer. We could look back on like departedflights.com and find it, but they had this, LA to Guam to Hong Kong to Singapore. I think I just said that. And it may have like dubbed into Bangkok. I'm really actually not sure. I've never been able to find a picture of an orange Braniff 747 in Singapore, but per their schedules that they flew there. But they flew out of Los Angeles. That's where they got the route authority out of, which they had like extremely limited service on the West Coast, extremely limited service to LA. So they're effectively this upstart airline in the context of, travel agents and consumers on the West Coast. They have no presence in the Pacific, and now they're flying a 747 on, my understanding was a daily basis. I mean, that is just, you're just bleeding out money. And they didn't have the staying power to maintain that at any level of scale, effectively, or they didn't have the money to maintain that at scale. I mean, they could have maintained it at some very small level of scale, but they weren't doing it at a small level of scale. They're doing it broadly. They added a lot of routes to Europe. Again, a big piece of that was Dallas, and what they abdicated in that was all the real estate, rather the resource they already had really tremendous ownership of. That was completely washed out as they extended themselves too far, lost all of this money in doing so, and were left as a shell of their former self, coupled entirely with the fact that that shell of former self was born around, well, a ton of lavish corporate spending that kind of went hand in hand there. But effectively they lost, they kind of took their eye off the ball in the context of just making money flying the airline that they had really, been, in so many words, for decades before that. And there was just this sense of we can't lose, that it informed a lot of kind of the ego driving of the airline in its last years. And then, as I referenced in this last episode, the CEO of Southwest, or not CEO, I believe it was the CFO, check me on that. We can do some due diligence there. But a C-suite leader at Southwest in the early 80s took over Braniff as kind of this rescue leadership team. They stripped it down to a domestic-only airline, domestic-only product with, like, I believe a Hawaii route that was being flown by a 747 from Dallas at the time. And then in that, reintroduced what they called Texas class, which was kind of, hey, come fly our 727s. We've got all of their seats, and we're going to kind of prop the service up. And so we're worth paying a little more for. We're better because we're Braniff. And that was nice to read, but unfortunately could not save them. They just simply were insolvent within a matter of time, shall we say, and not a very long matter of time. The exact amount of time, if I knew, I would say it right now, but I don't, so I don't want to say the wrong amount of time. The point, though, is that they ran out of money, and they ran out of money fast, and the rescue attempt was too late. But there's this interesting quote that was made by this C-suite leader from Southwest, whose name is escaping me at the moment, who said he was driving into Braniff's headquarters on one of his first days of the company, and they had all these flagpoles for what was all the countries that Braniff flew to, kind of as you drove into the headquarters, and they were all empty because they had to stop all the international flying because they had just gotten way over their skis in doing so. And so he said it was kind of like the mast of an old, like, shipwrecked ship just sitting on the shore. That's what it felt like, kind of walking into Braniff at the time, because it was really, what became true was it was too far gone. They had lost too much. The corporate culture had just kind of gone completely, out with all of this, aggressive expansion that couldn't be sustained, and they had lost their eye on the core business, and they didn't have anyone to come in and backstop. By the time a rescue team was put in place, and so far as leadership was concerned, it was not enough to turn the airline around. And so you had this airline again that was just extremely innovative, immensely brand forward, delivered a true quality, safe, like very, substantial airline product in the era of regulation, when you competed on product and not on price because you were given route authorities. That then all of a sudden now that airline can expand without limitation. They do expand without limitation, losing focus of, we actually have to run a business here, and a business that at core is profitable. In doing so, they run themselves out of money. And by the time it was clear that the music was stopping, it was too late, and Braniff came to pass. So that's the story of Braniff in a very tight nutshell, as told by someone who's just read a lot about them online and is kind of obsessed with what Braniff was, because I've grown up in Dallas and kind of the wake of Braniff here, right? Like, even, Braniff, when they're in their kind of final days, Southwest is still this regional player. American is kind of trying to jostle themselves into this leading position in Dallas. They had a market and a hub here, but they were very much you had American, you had Delta, you had Braniff, you had a much more competitive landscape in Dallas, and American really kind of won the crown, right? It makes a ton of money. I mean, so much insofar as their P&L is concerned, and just the value of their customer base. When you look at the overall enterprise value of the airline off of Dallas and the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and market, but it was Braniff's first. Interesting, right? Had that been that story been told differently, it could have ended differently too. And I think it's interesting because Braniff was so brand forward from the beginning. They stood to have been an airline that could have maintained that over a longer haul. Would they have done so? It's hard to say. American was really brand forward in the 80s and 90s, and that's not been their story really in the last couple of years. And what it comes down to always is leadership, right? Leadership is what ended Braniff. Leadership is what's taken the eye off being brand forward and customer centric at American, and not without intent at points, sometimes with, but not always without. It takes the right leadership and the right vision and the right storytelling to complement. And that's where Braniff did do very well. You can see it all over YouTube in the 60s and the 70s especially, and it was marvelous. And then it went too far, ran out of money, came to pass. And in the same vein, that's what's so interesting about where American is today. Just as a point of commentary alone, American is so varied in their product mix and really has these excellent parts of their product that fundamentally actually are a better airline than what they are given credit for being, because they don't storytell well. They're learning this is a problem in so many words. It seems their chief customer officer, who I've written about before, really she is perhaps just what's needed to give the airline a fresh breath of life. Can I speak? Hard to say. But the point is that they're not storytelling. And so as a result, their product, kind of goes to the lowest common denominator, whereas Delta and United, both of whom are leading in the industry and pulling away from a revenue earnings standpoint, they are storytelling well. Are their products so much better than Americans? On balance, no. But the storytelling, so much better. And as a result, you get a change in perception and a change in consumer behavior that follows it. That was a lot of words for what does it matter to you as a traveler. What does it matter to me? I do care about how it feels to fly a certain airline. And I would just gently say, and I'm flying Delta right now. I do think that Delta has something that is kind of in the water better than the other major network carriers in the U.S. They're not entirely different, but there's something in the water from an employee culture standpoint that I would gently suggest is comprehensively better. I know the inside of United quite well. I love United Airlines, and I really love flying United Airlines. I think they're making massive strides, and I believe that American can as well. And what we want in the United States and globally is a competitive, healthy airline industry, because what it breeds then into is a competitive, healthy travel industry. And what that is good for is the traveler at the end of the day. And so as a result, we don't just want that, but, well, it's a very good thing. So it's more than just a want. It's a great benefit. Does that make sense? I hope it does. If it doesn't, I'll cover it in the next episode. But for today, I'm going to proverbially, metaphorically, it's not a proverb, it's a metaphor, goodness, land the plane. Thank you always for flying with me. Thanks for listening to the Tommy Obenchain podcast. We're here to get better, and we're here to travel, and we're here to travel more. So thanks for talking about travel adventures and points with me. I'm Tommy Obenchain. Until next time, seriously and again, thank you for listening. Also, just wanted to say this real quick, kind of tag on to the podcast. If you have an idea for an episode, if you have a comment that you'd like to be heard, drop us an email here. Drop me an email. I'd like to hear it. You are the hero of the story, and quite substantially why I'm so glad to get to do this podcast. Obviously, I so enjoy talking about this, and I'm excited for what we have ahead of us. But in the same token, want to hear what you both have to say and what you'd like to hear. So please do write in, and know that we'll catch you soon in the next episode. Thanks for flying with me. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm holding my mic differently. If you're watching this on video, I saw other people were doing this, and I was like, this is neat. I'm just going to hold the mic up to my mouth like this, which sounds so rational if you're just listening to it. But, clipping the mic onto your lapel is what I thought you were supposed to do. And then I noticed some cool guys on YouTube, and it was like, oh, look, they're just holding it. I'm just going to hold it in my hand. So that's what we're doing. Okay, enough about that. Thanks for joining me here at the Sky Club for this episode. I'm so excited. And thank you for flying with me here on the Tommy Obenchain podcast.